The betrayal didn't come with shouting. It came with a smile, polite, practiced, and dripping with charm. "My girlfriend loves vintage pieces," my grandson said, holding up the velvet box I'd kept at the back of my dresser for 50 years. "You said you don't wear them anymore, Grandma. They just sit here collecting dust." He said it softly, but his fingers were already prying open the lid before I could answer. Inside lay my wedding jewelry, the gold bangles my husband had given me on our first anniversary, the ruby pendant from my mother, the earrings I'd promised to pass on to my daughter. They weren't just ornaments, they were pieces of my life, each one wrapped in memory. I had told him stories about them 100 times, how I'd worn them at the summer festival when his grandfather danced with me under the lanterns, how I'd saved one chain from being sold when money ran short. I thought those stories meant something to him. I thought I meant something to him. But that day, his tone was different, slick, rehearsed. I'd heard that same tone years ago, when my husband's business partner smiled through a lie just before stealing everything we owned. The same tone my sister used when she told me she'd just borrow my dowry money. Greed had a voice, and I knew it too well. "Of course, darling," I said. "If she'll wear them with love, then it's a blessing." He grinned, kissed my cheek, and pocketed the box like a thief in daylight. After he left, the house felt emptier than usual. The sunlight hit the photo frames on the shelf, his school graduation, his first car, the birthday cake I baked when he turned 18. In each picture, my smile looked proud. Now, it felt foolish. That night, as I sat at my sewing table, I couldn't stop thinking about the way he looked at those jewels, not with sentiment, but calculation. He had her picture as his phone wallpaper, a young woman with a sharp chin and sharper eyes. I'd seen her once in my living room, glancing around not at people but at things. The kind of gaze that measures worth in carats, not kindness. 2 days later, my neighbor Mrs. Dunn dropped by for tea and gossip, as she always did. "Saw your grandson at the mall," she said, lowering her voice. "He was showing off some jewelry to a girl. Said it was an heirloom from his side. Looked mighty pleased with himself." My hand didn't even tremble as I poured the tea. "He must be proud," I said. Inside, I felt something cold and sharp slide into place, not anger yet, but understanding. When my husband passed, I learned to survive quietly. I learned how to hide pain behind patience. But I also learned how to hide things, real things, where no one would think to look. That jewelry wasn't just gold and gems. Decades ago, during the worst years, I'd hidden something in it, a truth that could ruin reputations and undo lies. Something my late husband had written, signed, and sealed. Something I had kept locked away in that very box. The boy didn't know what he'd taken. Not yet. That night, I opened my old sewing kit, took out a fresh piece of linen, and began to stitch. Each thread went in slowly, evenly, a pattern forming only I could see. I wasn't sewing clothes this time. I was preparing something else. By the time I finished, the clock struck midnight, and my hands were steady again. I placed the last piece of fabric in a small envelope and sealed it with wax. The next morning, my grandson texted me a photo, her, wearing my ruby pendant. The caption read, "She loves it. Looks even better on her, doesn't it?" I didn't reply. I only smiled, the same quiet smile I wore the day my husband's partner thought he'd outsmarted me. Because this time, I wasn't the fool being robbed. This time, I was setting the board. And my dear grandson had just made his first move. When the first photo appeared on social media, I didn't even have to look for it. My neighbor's daughter showed me on her phone while helping me water the roses. "Isn't this your necklace?" she asked innocently, holding the screen close. There she was, my grandson's girlfriend, posing in a cafe, her manicured hand tilted just enough for the ruby pendant to catch the light. The caption read, "When he says he'd give me the world and proves it, gemstone red heart, #heirloom #forever." The comments below made me feel the kind of ache only the elderly know, not the sharp sting of fresh betrayal, but the slow, cold sinking of knowing you were never truly seen. Lucky girl. So vintage. He's such a gentleman. What a priceless gift. Each word was a hammer striking the past I'd built. I didn't blame her. Not entirely. Greed often dresses itself as love, and charm is its favorite perfume. But what hurt was knowing my grandson had let her believe the story, that those jewels came from him, not the wrinkled hands that once fed him soup when he was sick, not the woman who stayed up nights sewing his school uniforms because his mother was too tired. That evening, he came over again. Not for me, of course, for more things. "Grandma, do you still have those bangles?" he asked, pretending to browse through my cupboard. Her friends loved the pendant. "She's been hinting how pretty gold looks on her." He laughed, as though sharing an inside joke. I watched him, the tilt of his head, the impatience in his eyes. He thought I was slow now, dull, softened by age. I let him talk, let him pick up what he thought was a second treasure box. I even offered tea. He refused, saying he was late for dinner reservations. When he left, he didn't notice that the bangles he took weren't the real ones. They were imitations, hollow, lightweight, painted gold. Inside each, hidden beneath the thin metal shell, was a small strip of old paper coated in wax. I sat alone afterward, the clock ticking like a pulse in the quiet room. That boy had grown up in this house. He'd taken his first steps right here, under this roof. I had bandaged his knees when he fell off his bicycle. I had saved coins for his tuition, even when my hands ached from arthritis. And now he had turned my love into currency for his vanity. But old women like me have one advantage: we've already lost everything once. There's nothing left to fear. The next week, whispers started to drift my way, the kind that travel faster than wind. At the Women's Guild meeting, Mrs. Dunn leaned over her embroidery and said, "Did you hear? Your grandson might be getting engaged soon. The young lady's been showing off a ring." I smiled softly. That's lovely news. But inside, something twisted tighter. I knew what he was doing. He was using my heirlooms to buy a future, a glittering facade built on borrowed shine. But I also knew something he didn't. Those heirlooms were the key to secrets his grandfather had buried decades ago. Back then, before the bankruptcy, before the scandal, my husband had written a confession, proof of the partner who had forged signatures and stolen funds. He'd hidden it in the jewelry's inner casing, a plan we kept secret when we feared everything might be taken from us. That paper, old as dust but legal as ever, was worth more than gold. And now my grandson had it, or thought he did. Days turned to weeks. He stopped visiting. My calls went unanswered. Until one morning, a letter arrived. No return address. The handwriting, careless, young. Inside, a single note. "Please don't contact me anymore. I'm starting my own life now." No signature. No love. Just a line drawn through bloodline. I folded the letter neatly and placed it in my drawer beside the empty jewelry case. Then I dialed the number of an old friend, Mr. Chambers, my late husband's lawyer. He answered on the third ring, his voice still deep and deliberate even in old age. "Mrs. Callahan," he said warmly. "It's been too long." "It has," I said. "But I think it's time we reopen something from the past." That afternoon, I took a slow walk to the post office, a small package in my purse. Inside it, carefully wrapped in cloth, were the real pieces, the original jewelry, untouched, heavy, and gleaming with the weight of truth. I had switched them weeks ago, before my grandson's second visit. The fakes were long gone, floating around the neck of that girl, clinking on her wrists at parties, while the real ones slept in my keeping, the secrets intact. At home, I sat by the window and watched the light fade over the garden. I didn't want revenge. I wanted understanding. But people like him didn't learn through love, only consequence. That evening, the phone rang. It was my daughter, his mother. She sounded worried, exhausted. "Ma, I just heard from Derek's fiancée's family. They're saying the jewelry you gave was counterfeit. Cheap replicas. They're furious." I let out a soft sigh, neither denying nor confirming. "That's strange," I said. "Maybe they should have them appraised properly." "Ma, this is serious," she said. "They're threatening to call the police. They're saying he embarrassed them, that he lied about the jewels being real. Derek is humiliated." Humiliated. That word settled like a feather on my heart. "I'll pray for him," I said quietly. "And for her." The call ended, but the silence it left behind was thick and sweet. For the first time in weeks, I slept soundly. The next morning, someone banged on my door. It was Derek, my grandson, red-eyed, furious, the boyish arrogance stripped away. "You ruined everything," he shouted. "She broke up with me. Her family called me a liar. They said your jewelry was fake." I looked at him for a long time. The same boy who once brought me dandelions from the yard now stood trembling in rage, his pride shattered. Was it fake? He demanded. Tell me. I smiled gently. You'd know better than I would, dear. You had it appraised, didn't you? He glared, his jaw working, his voice cracking. Why would you do that to me? To me, Grandma. The word grandma came out like an insult, not a title. I could have told him the truth right then, that it wasn't cruelty but correction, that I'd only given him what he'd earned. But something told me it was too soon. Instead, I placed a small teacup before him, just like when he was little. Sit, I said softly. You look tired. He turned away, fists clenching. You don't understand. I needed that jewelry. I needed her. She was my chance. Your chance for what? I asked. A woman who loves stones more than souls? He didn't answer. The silence said everything. Finally he left, slamming the door so hard that the picture frames rattled on the wall. I sat there long after he'd gone, staring at the trembling shadows of my past on the table. Later that night, Mrs. Dunn called again. Have you seen the news? She asked, whispering like it was a sin. That girl, Derek's ex, she's posting everywhere. Says your jewelry had some kind of message inside. A note or something. She's threatening to expose it. I froze. A message? The fake bangles, the wax-coated strips of paper. I had used blank parchment, or so I thought. But maybe one had not been blank after all. Maybe one had contained the letter, my husband's confession, the one that could shake everything if made public. I rushed to the drawer, opened it, checked the envelope I'd sent to Mr. Chambers. It was still sealed, untouched. Which meant the real letter wasn't with him. It was out there, in her hands. I felt my heart pound like it hadn't in years. The line between revenge and risk had blurred, and the game I started in silence had just turned dangerous. For the first time, I whispered into the empty room, what have I done? Outside, thunder rolled low across the horizon, as if answering. I didn't sleep that night. The storm outside wouldn't let me, but neither would my conscience. The rain clawed at the windows while I sat in the armchair by the cold fireplace, staring at the jewelry box, empty, innocent, mocking. That letter wasn't meant to see the light of day. My husband had written it in shame, his hand shaking as he confessed how his partner, Mr. Lee, had laundered money through their company using his name. He'd wanted to go to the authorities, but illness took him before he could. He left me with the confession, signed and sealed, and I'd hidden it away in the jewelry, thinking no one would ever look there. And now it was in the hands of a stranger, a young woman who valued hashtags over history. At dawn, I made tea and stared at the phone. My hands trembled as I dialed my old lawyer, Mr. Chambers. He picked up on the second ring. Mrs. Callahan, up so early? I think I've made a terrible mistake, I said quietly. He listened patiently as I explained. No judgment, just silence. Finally he spoke, slow and measured. That letter, if genuine, could reopen your husband's case. But if it falls into the wrong hands, it could also drag your family through public scandal. My family already threw me away, I said bitterly. All I have left is truth. Truth, he sighed, can be heavier than gold. Let me make a few calls. Don't speak to anyone about this yet. After hanging up, I looked out the window. The storm had stopped, but the sky remained bruised gray, like the world itself was holding its breath. By afternoon, my phone buzzed again. It wasn't Chambers. It was her. The message came from an unknown number, but I recognized her face in the profile picture, the smirking young woman with my ruby pendant at her throat. I think this belongs to you. But maybe you'd like to make an offer before I show everyone what's inside. I stared at the words for a long time. Not even a thief, a blackmailer. She'd found the paper, opened it, and realized its value. I typed back, slowly. Come to my house tomorrow. 3 p.m. Bring the letter. We'll talk. She replied instantly. Good. Don't waste my time. I sat there for a while, the quiet ticking of the clock pressing into my thoughts. Then I called someone I hadn't spoken to in 20 years. Elaine. I said when she answered. There was a long pause. Oh my. Agnes? After all this time. After all this time, I echoed softly. I need your help. Elaine wasn't just my sister. She was my shadow, the one who had once betrayed me by taking my dowry to pay her husband's debts. We hadn't spoken since. But she also knew how to read people, how to twist a lie until it confessed the truth. The next day, the doorbell rang at 2:58. Elaine was already sitting in my parlor, wearing her old fur-collared coat, her lips pursed in judgment. "You're sure about this?" she asked. "Yes," I said. "But stay quiet until I signal." The young woman arrived looking like she owned the world, sleek hair, red nails, phone in hand like a weapon. She didn't even say hello. She walked straight to the coffee table, placed a plastic sleeve down, and smirked. "You have something valuable. I have something more valuable. So, how much is your family's dignity worth to you?" I studied her, the way she kept glancing toward her phone camera, probably recording. She wanted a reaction, a scandal, a viral moment. I didn't give her one. Instead, I poured tea. "Do you know what that paper is?" I asked softly. She shrugged. "Some confession letter. Business crime. Honestly, I don't care. But my boyfriend, your grandson, said it could be worth a lot to the right people." Elaine's head tilted sharply. "So this was his idea," she said coolly. The girl hesitated. "He told me you were sitting on secrets. That you owed him. Said if we found something, we'd finally get what's rightfully his." Rightfully his. I felt the floor of my heart give way. "He used you," I said gently. "You think he loves you, but he's setting you up. If that letter goes public, the only name on it is my husband's. My family's. You'll be the one holding stolen property, and the one blamed when lawyers come knocking." Her smirk faltered. Elaine leaned in, voice sharp as glass. "Listen, sweetheart. You think you're clever? My sister here buried men twice your age in silence. If you think you can extort her, you're playing with fire." The girl straightened, trying to recover her bravado. "You can't scare me. I already have copies." That word, copies, made my breath catch. "Show me," I said. She smiled thinly, pulling up her phone and scrolling through photos. And there it was, a clear image of the letter, my husband's handwriting unmistakable. But something else caught my eye, the watermark. It wasn't from my husband's stationery. It was from my grandson's company letterhead. He'd forged it. That wasn't the real confession, it was a counterfeit. He must have taken one of my husband's old ledgers, traced the signature, and created his own fake document, maybe to frame someone, maybe to use as leverage against me. And the girl, she thought it was genuine. I looked at her kindly. "You poor thing," I whispered. "You don't even realize you've been made a pawn." She frowned. "What are you talking about?" "The letter you're holding isn't worth money. It's worth prison time, for him and maybe for you if you keep it." Her face paled. "You're lying." Elaine chuckled darkly. "Try showing it to the police then. Tell them you blackmailed an old widow with forged evidence." The girl's hand trembled. She grabbed the letter, shoved it back into her bag. I didn't know." I stood slowly, my joints aching but my gaze steady. "Go home, dear. Delete every copy. And tell my grandson that his game is over." She left in a hurry, slamming the door behind her. Elaine exhaled, shaking her head. "You've raised a snake, Agnes." "No," I said softly. "I fed one." We sat in silence for a while, the ticking clock filling the room again. Later that evening, my phone rang once more, a new number. It was Derek. His voice was calm, too calm. "I heard you scared her off," he said. "Smart move. But it's not over." "What do you want, Derek?" "I want what's mine," he said. "You think you can keep everything forever? That confession is real, Grandma. You just don't know what it can do for me." "What it can do for you?" I asked quietly. "It can open doors," he said. "There are people who'd pay to make certain details disappear. You think I'm stupid? I've seen those ledgers. Granddad wasn't as innocent as you make him sound." There it was, the truth, naked and cruel. He didn't want justice. He wanted leverage. "Be careful, Derek," I said. "There's a difference between power and poison. You're drinking one, thinking it's the other." He laughed softly. I learned from the best. Then he hung up. I stood by the window long after, watching the streetlights blur into gold smears through the glass. My reflection stared back at me, old, lined, but not broken. For a moment, I thought of burning the real confession, ending this chain of greed for good. But something stopped me, a sense that the story wasn't done yet. The next morning, a thick envelope arrived from Mr. Chambers. Inside were legal documents, copies of my husband's will, his original business files, and a note that chilled me to the bone. Agnes, you should know, Derek came to see me last week. He's been asking about inheritance rights and property transfers. I did not give him information, but he seemed confident he already has documents to prove ownership of your estate. Be cautious. I stared at the papers in my trembling hands. He wasn't just stealing jewelry anymore. He was after everything. And that meant only one thing. It was time to stop defending, and start fighting back. I folded the will carefully, tucked it under my arm, and whispered to my late husband's portrait above the mantel. You built this house with your hands. I'll protect it with mine. The storm outside returned, harder this time, pounding against the windows like warning drums. But I didn't flinch. Because tomorrow, I'd walk into Derek's office unannounced. And I wouldn't be going alone. The morning of the confrontation arrived cold and unervingly clear, the kind of morning when the sky looks polished, too bright to trust. I dressed carefully, as though heading to a church service, black wool coat, pearls, small leather handbag. My husband's photograph watched from the mantel as I buttoned the coat. Wish me strength, I whispered to it, though I wasn't sure if I deserved blessing or forgiveness. The plan was simple. I would walk into Derek's office, the company he'd started with money I had lent him, and end this quietly, before he destroyed both our names. But something told me that quiet was no longer possible. Elaine insisted on coming with me. If I don't go, she said, tightening her scarf, you'll end up forgiving him halfway through. And this time, someone needs to make sure you don't. We rode the bus together, two old women in a sea of commuters, clutching umbrellas like swords. As the city blurred past, I thought about the years I'd spent raising that boy. His first day at school, when he'd cried until I held his hand. The day he brought home his first paycheck and pressed it into my palm with pride. Somewhere between those moments and this one, greed had eaten him alive. The building loomed ahead, glass and steel, modern and cold. A polished plaque read D. Callahan Holdings. The irony nearly made me laugh. Inside, the receptionist barely looked up. Do you have an appointment? She asked, her tone clipped. No, I said, meeting her eyes. But tell Mr. Callahan his grandmother's here. And that I brought company. Something flickered in her expression, surprise, then discomfort. She made the call. Within minutes, Derek appeared at the top of the marble staircase, his tailored suit immaculate, his face unreadable. Grandma, he said flatly, descending with the poise of a man who thinks he owns gravity. This isn't really a good time. I'll make it one, I said. He sighed, running a hand through his styled hair. Fine. My office. The elevator ride was silent. I could hear my own heartbeat, steady and stubborn. Elaine stood beside me, her eyes like daggers. When the doors opened, we stepped into a space that reeked of money, sleek furniture, glass desk, the city skyline stretching endlessly beyond. There was even a framed picture of him and the girl, smiling like two actors after the final curtain. He gestured toward the chairs. Please sit. No, I said. This won't take long. He raised an eyebrow. Then by all means. I pulled the envelope from my bag, the one Chambers had sent. I laid it on the desk, perfectly centered. That, I said, is your grandfather's will. The real one. It names me as executor of his estate, and custodian of every property and account tied to his name. Which means every document you've been forging is nothing but paper. His smile faltered for the briefest moment before returning, polished and cold. Forgery? Grandma, please. You're confused. Am I? I opened the envelope, sliding out the original documents and the notarized copy Chambers had included. Because according to Mr. Chambers, you've been asking about property transfers, ownership claims, even legacy rights. Do you deny that? He chuckled, leaning back in his chair. You've been talking to that fossil of a lawyer? Grandma, come on. You're tired. This obsession with the past, it's not healthy. I'm just trying to take care of things for you. Elaine stepped forward. You mean take things from her, she snapped. Derek's gaze flicked to her with irritation. Ah, Aunt Elaine. Still meddling, I see. Meddling runs in the family, she said coolly. Except some of us use it to protect, not plunder. He smirked. Spare me the morality play. You both had your time. The world's changed. Yes, I said softly. But people haven't. For a moment, silence hung heavy. Then I leaned forward. Where's the letter? He tilted his head. What letter? You know which one. The confession your grandfather wrote. You gave that girl a forged copy and told her it would buy you a future. Where is the original? Something flickered in his eyes, a flash of guilt or perhaps fear, quickly buried under arrogance. Maybe I have it. Maybe I don't. Either way, it's safe. Safe for whom? He shrugged. For me. For all of us, if you play nice. Play nice. I repeated. You've stolen from me. Lied about me. Used the dead to buy your comfort. Tell me, Derek, what exactly do you think you're owed? His composure cracked. Everything, he burst out. You think I don't know the stories? How you sat on wealth while Mom struggled. You let us believe we were broke while you kept jewels, properties, money hidden away. You think your sacrifices make you a saint, but all they made you was selfish. His voice echoed off the glass walls. I felt each word like a slap, but I didn't flinch. I hid those things, I said quietly, because your grandfather's business was built on lies. That letter, the real one, would have exposed not just his partner but him. I spent decades cleaning up their mess. And when the dust settled, I built something honest. You inherited safety, not secrets. He shook his head, jaw tight. I don't believe you. Then believe this, Elaine cut in. She reached into her purse and placed a small recorder on the desk, pressing play. Derek's own voice filled the room, a recording of his phone call from 2 nights ago. You think I'm stupid? I've seen those ledgers. Granddad wasn't as innocent as you make him sound. He froze. How? You called her, Elaine said. On speaker. You forget old houses have good acoustics. For the first time, his confidence cracked wide open. You had no right. You had no right, I said firmly, to trade my memories for profit. He glared at me, breathing hard. What do you want from me, Grandma? An apology? Fine. I'm sorry. Now give me what's mine and we'll pretend this never happened. I almost pitied him. Almost. What's yours? I whispered. You think inheritance is a prize, not a responsibility. You think love is a transaction. You've mistaken generosity for weakness. He slammed his hand on the desk. I built this company. You think I did that on sentiment? You taught me to survive. Don't act surprised I learned. I nodded slowly. Then survive this. I opened my bag and drew out a small USB drive. Inside are the copies of the real letter, your grandfather's confession, and every document proving the embezzlement his partner committed. I'm giving them to the authorities today. That business, the one whose name you borrowed for your empire, was founded on fraud. You've been building castles on sand. He went pale. You wouldn't dare. I already did, I said. Mr. Chambers filed the report this morning. He stared at me, silent. Then something in his face hardened into disbelief, then rage. You've destroyed me, he hissed. Do you understand? Everything I've worked for. Wasn't yours to begin with, I finished. He stepped forward suddenly, towering over me. For a moment, I saw the boy he'd been, angry, lost, frightened, but the man he'd become had buried that child deep. You'll regret this, he whispered. You've made an enemy out of your own blood. I met his gaze without trembling. No, Derek. You did. The day you chose greed over family. Elaine stood then, her voice sharp as flint. You're finished, boy. The press will eat you alive. He laughed bitterly. The press? Oh, you think I'm afraid of scandal? I've already sent the fake confession to them. By now, half the city's reading it. The words hit me like ice. You what? He grinned. Let's see who the world believes, a respected businessman, or an old widow clinging to secrets. My knees nearly buckled. Elaine caught my arm. Agnes. But I straightened. Then you've just made the final mistake. I reached into my bag again and pulled out an envelope marked to be opened publicly. Inside this, I said, is your grandfather's journal, his handwriting, his witnesses, his truth. And it will speak louder than your lies. I turned to the door, my heart hammering. You wanted a stage, Derek? Let's give you one. 2 hours later, we were standing in the lobby of the very law firm that had once represented my husband. Mr. Chambers was waiting, solemn as a judge, reporters already swarming outside. Are you sure about this? He asked quietly. Yes, I said. Let him watch the world see who he really is. We walked into the press room together. Cameras flashed. My voice trembled at first, then steadied with each word. I am Agnes Callahan, I began. Widow of the late Thomas Callahan. 50 years ago, our family business collapsed due to fraud committed by his partner, and hidden by my husband out of fear and shame. I have lived half my life protecting his name, and the other half watching that silence rot our family from within. Today that ends. Gasps rippled through the crowd. I continued, holding up the journal. This is the truth. And with it, I clear not only my husband's conscience but my own. No more shadows. No more greed disguised as legacy. Elaine squeezed my hand under the table. Outside the glass wall, I saw Derek arrive, too late. His face pale, jaw tight. Cameras turned toward him like predators. Reporters shouted his name. Mr. Callahan. Do you confirm your grandmother's statement? Did you forge documents? Were you aware of the embezzlement? He didn't answer. The same arrogance that once held his spine straight now bent it under the weight of exposure. I watched from the podium, neither triumphant nor vengeful. Just tired. The truth had finally stepped into daylight, and it was blinding. When the conference ended, Mr. Chambers escorted me outside. It's done, he said softly. You've restored your husband's name. But the boy, he'll face consequences. I know, I said. But maybe that's the only way he'll learn what worth really means. That night, I sat alone again in my house, quiet, still, heavy with memory. The phone rang once. I let it ring. Twice. Then I picked up. His voice was small, broken. Grandma. I said nothing. I didn't mean for it to go this far, he whispered. They're investigating me. The papers, everyone's calling. Please, tell them it was a misunderstanding. You built this, I said softly. And now you must stand in it. There was a pause. Then, barely audible, do you still love me? The question pierced deeper than any accusation. My eyes filled before I could stop them. Yes, I said finally. But love doesn't mean protection anymore. It means truth. He didn't reply. Only silence. Then the line clicked dead. I sat there a long time, the receiver cold in my hand. The grandfather clock struck 11, each chime echoing like a heartbeat through the dark. Elaine's words came back to me, you'll end up forgiving him halfway through. Maybe she was right. Maybe forgiveness was the last trap I hadn't escaped. But not tonight. Tonight, I had done what needed doing. Still, as I looked toward the window, I thought I saw movement, a figure across the street, standing just beyond the lamplight watching. Tall. Still. Familiar. And for one terrifying moment, I wondered if the war between truth and blood had really ended. Or merely changed battlegrounds. The morning after the press conference, the air smelled of rain and scandal. Newspapers lay on my doorstep like small corpses, each carrying the same headline. Callahan heir under investigation, grandmother reveals family secret. My face was there too, old, lined, unsmiling, under the smaller caption. The widow who broke her silence. I stood in the doorway in my nightrobe, the damp air brushing my face as I stared down at the chaos I had unleashed. For years I had begged the world to forget my husband's name, now it was everywhere. Justice had come, but it was not gentle. The kettle whistled faintly in the kitchen. Elaine was already awake, sitting at the table with her coffee, reading one of the papers with grim fascination. Well, she said, folding the page, you certainly know how to make an exit. It's not an exit, I said quietly, pouring tea. It's a reckoning. Same thing in the end. She wasn't wrong. I could already feel the slow unraveling, phone calls from journalists, neighbors pretending to offer sympathy just to taste gossip, the sharp edge of judgment hiding under polite curiosity. But beneath all that noise, there was something else. Something quieter. Relief. For 50 years, I had carried the weight of my husband's sins like a stone in my pocket, too heavy to drop, too shameful to show. Now it was out in the open. And though the world was staring, I finally felt light. Still, every freedom carries a cost. And my cost was Derek. By noon, the television was filled with clips of him leaving his office, photographers swarming, microphones in his face. He didn't speak, just shoved through the crowd, jaw clenched, eyes hollow. The commentators spoke of financial audits, board meetings, suspensions. His company's stock had already dropped 12 points. The kingdom he'd built on borrowed shine was crumbling before the afternoon sun. I watched it all in silence. Elaine watched me. You did what you had to, she said softly. Don't start doubting now. But she didn't understand. Doubt isn't a choice. It's a shadow that grows where love once stood. That evening, I received a call from Mr. Chambers. The authorities have confirmed receipt of the documents, he said. The investigation is moving swiftly. Agnes, they might ask you to testify. Testify? Yes. About the original fraud, the will, the letter, and your grandson's involvement. I closed my eyes. If it must be done, I'll do it. I'll be there with you, he assured. But I thought you should know, Derek's lawyers reached out to negotiate a statement. They want to claim he was manipulated, that he didn't understand the nature of what he was sharing. A bitter laugh escaped me. Manipulated by whom? His conscience. Chambers didn't answer. Be careful, Agnes. The boy is cornered. And cornered men don't think, they strike. That night, I sat alone by the fire. The house was quiet again. Elaine had gone home, promising to check in tomorrow. Outside, the wind scraped at the windows like a restless spirit. I thought of Derek, not the man in the news, but the boy in my garden years ago, chasing butterflies with his father's old net, laughing without a trace of the greed that would one day destroy him. When had it begun? Was it in his blood, that hunger for more? Or had I planted it myself, every time I gave without boundaries, every time I taught him that love would always forgive, no matter the sin? Maybe this was my punishment, to raise the very hand that would one day take everything. The clock struck midnight when headlights flashed outside. I frowned. Visitors at that hour were never good news. Then came the knock, firm, fast, urgent. I opened the door to find him there. Derek. He looked nothing like the man who had stood in that glass office days ago. His hair was disheveled, his eyes bloodshot, his expensive suit creased and soaked from rain. He was shaking, from cold or anger, I couldn't tell. Can I come in? He asked, voice rough. I stepped aside. He walked in slowly, dripping water on the rug, staring around the living room as if seeing it for the first time. The photos on the wall, him as a boy, his parents, me and my husband, each seemed to mock him. You destroyed me, he said quietly. Everything I built, gone. No, I said, closing the door. Everything you stole, returned. He turned sharply. You think this is justice? You've humiliated me, Grandma. My company, my reputation, they're tearing me apart. I met his anger with calm. You did that yourself. He ran a hand through his hair, pacing like a trapped animal. You don't get it. I was supposed to make us proud again. Fix what Granddad ruined. Everyone respected me, until you opened your mouth. Respect built on lies isn't respect, I said softly. It's theater. He stopped pacing. His eyes glistened, though not entirely from tears. I wanted to give you something back, he whispered. You spent your life cleaning up after everyone else. I thought, if I became successful enough, rich enough, you'd finally be proud of me. Oh, Derek, I said, the ache returning to my chest. You could have been broke and honest, and I would have been proud. But you chose rich and rotten. He flinched. I didn't know how else to do it, he muttered. You taught me to survive. To play smart. To never be the fool in the room. I taught you to be kind, I said. You just never thought kindness was a strength. He stood there, breathing heavily, his hands trembling. Then he said the words I had dreaded most. They're going to arrest me. My heart dropped. I didn't mean for any of this, he continued. The fake letter, that was just leverage. I thought if I could sell it quietly, no one would get hurt. But now it's out. Everyone's after me. He looked up, eyes desperate. Please, Grandma. You have influence. Talk to Chambers. Tell them I didn't know. Tell them you made me do it. The plea hit me like a blade. For a moment, I saw the little boy again, frightened, begging for help. But behind his eyes, the same manipulation flickered, subtle but familiar. I won't lie for you, I said. He stared, disbelieving. You'd rather watch me go to prison? I'd rather you face the truth. His face twisted, grief, fury, disbelief all at once. You always were heartless, he spat. You just hide it behind morals. Maybe, I said. But at least my heart beats clean. He turned to leave, then stopped at the door. You think you've won, he said quietly. But when I'm gone, all people will remember is that you destroyed your own family. He slammed the door behind him, the echo shattering the silence like glass. Days turned into weeks. The headlines multiplied, then slowly began to fade as new scandals replaced old ones. Derek's company filed for bankruptcy. The girl, his ex, sold her story to a magazine, painting herself as another victim. The world moved on. But I didn't. Every evening, I found myself by the window, watching the street as if expecting him to return. Sometimes I imagined him there, just beyond the lamplight, standing the way he had that night outside the press conference. Other times, I'd wake from dreams where he was small again, handing me flowers from the garden, his hands dirty, his smile pure. And each morning, I'd whisper into the empty air, you were loved, even when you forgot how to be. 3 months later, a letter arrived, handwritten, postmarked from a rehabilitation center 2 towns over. Grandma, I don't expect forgiveness. I'm not even sure I deserve to call you that anymore. But I wanted to say, I understand now. You weren't punishing me. You were saving me from what I was becoming. They've given me a chance here, counseling, community service, maybe redemption if I earn it. I don't know what comes next. But I want to try. Tell Aunt Elaine I said thank you for recording me. Without that, I'd still be lying to myself. Derek. The ink was smudged in places, maybe by rain, maybe by tears. I folded the letter and placed it beside my husband's photograph. You'd be proud of him, I murmured. Maybe not for what he did, but for finally seeing himself. Elaine visited that afternoon, bringing a basket of pears and her usual bluntness. Looks like the boy might still have a soul, she said after reading the letter. Maybe, I said. But souls need tending, like gardens. Leave them too long, they wither. She smiled faintly. You always did like gardening. I still do, I said, glancing out the window at the small patch of earth blooming behind the house. Things grow again if you let them. Spring came early that year. The snow melted fast, the trees blushed green, and the air carried the faint hum of forgiveness. One morning, I took my cane and walked to the churchyard, the same place where, years ago, I had buried both my husband and my anger. The priest recognized me. Mrs. Callahan, he said kindly, I saw your story on the news. Brave thing you did. It wasn't bravery, I said, smiling faintly. Just overdue honesty. I knelt by my husband's grave, brushing leaves from the stone. You'd laugh if you saw it all, I whispered. The lawyers, the reporters, the shouting. You always said the truth would ruin us. Maybe it did. But it also set me free. The wind carried the scent of lilacs, his favorite. I closed my eyes and let it pass over me. As I stood to leave, I saw a small figure at the edge of the cemetery road. Derek. He looked thinner, humbler, wearing plain clothes. No suit, no pretense. We stared at each other for a long moment. Then he walked closer, stopping a few feet away. I didn't think you'd want to see me, he said quietly. I wasn't sure I would, I replied. I'm sorry, he said simply. No rehearsed lines, no performance, just the truth. Not just for what I did. For how I saw you. I thought you were holding me back. But you were the only one trying to hold me up. The words broke something inside me, something I hadn't realized was still brittle. Come, I said softly. Walk with me. We walked slowly through the rows of graves, past names both famous and forgotten. He told me about the rehabilitation program, the counselor who made him face his reflection without excuses, the community kitchen where he now volunteered twice a week. I clean tables, he said with a small smile. It's humbling. It's honest work, I said. And honesty is harder than business. When we reached the gate, he stopped. Do you think people can really change? I looked at him, truly looked. The arrogance was gone, replaced by weariness, yes, but also something else. Hope. People don't change, I said. They remember who they were before greed convinced them otherwise. He nodded slowly. Then maybe I'm remembering. We parted with a hug, brief, trembling, real. That night, as the sun dipped behind the hills, I sat at my window with my journal, the same one I used to record family recipes, birthdays, the tiny triumphs of ordinary life. I opened to a blank page and began to write. They say betrayal ends families. But sometimes, it's the only thing strong enough to reveal what a family truly is. Love is not blind. It sees every flaw, every wound, and still chooses truth. If you are reading this, and someone you love has broken you, remember, you cannot lose what was never honest. You can only set it free. I closed the book and set it beside the window, letting the last light of the day touch its cover. Outside, the garden swayed gently in the wind. For the first time in years, the house didn't feel empty. It felt alive. And as the sky turned gold, I whispered, not to my husband, not to Derek, but to whoever might one day listen. Forgive when you can. Fight when you must. And never let love become your blindfold.